All right, well, it's a couple minutes after 8 o'clock and we've got a few more participants. I sent a reminder to the mailing list as well. Hopefully we'll get some more stragglers. Welcome everyone to the DELEG interim meeting. If you don't know, this session is being recorded. I will be the only one with you today. Brian will be a little bit late. He will join in the middle. And Eric also sends his apologies. He won't be able to make it. I'm going to assume Tommy will be here. Tommy, are you here yet? Hopefully Tommy makes it as well.
Tommy's here.
Oh, great. Hi, Tommy. Thanks. So since this is an IETF meeting, we have the note well. This is something you should already be familiar with. It describes certain expectations on your participation and behavior here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask myself or another working group chair or area director. And with that, let me show the agenda. So we have 90 minutes today. We want to open up with a kind of an open mic session for people who have recently spent time implementing the protocol, implementing DELEG. Give them the chance to talk about their experience implementing and any challenges they may have encountered. And then we'll move into a session talking about the protocol draft, specification clarity for implementers if any are needed, whether it's complete, and then at the end, we'll have 5 or so minutes to talk about the possibility of start working on extensions for secure transports, and then any other business. Any questions before we dive into the agenda? All right, great. So like I said, since there's been a lot of activity recently from folks who have taken the time to implement DELEG as written down, we wanted to give anyone who's done that a chance to share their experience, talk about if they had any problems or maybe it was super easy or so on. So I would like to open it up to anyone to speak here, especially if you had spent time implementing recently. So go ahead and jump in the queue if you'd like. Hey, Paul, go ahead.
I see Ralph got in the queue. I was getting in the queue to say my implementation is one of the least interesting, so let's let Ralph go instead.
Okay.
Okay, so Akamai has a recursive and an authoritative implementation. Overall, it was straightforward. We could reuse some of the code from SVCB. The thing that was a bit tricky was the include DELEG I and the following something in the recursion process, but I mean, it was doable, but that was the only really thing where, I mean, we didn't have any problems. It's just it was not straightforward. It's just replacing some stuff. And other than that, I mean, it's working fine. I mean, we had, I think when Libor did his not implementation, we discovered that we had not anticipated one use case for the specific non-NS case, but I mean, that was easily fixable. Yeah, so everything's good.
Thanks a lot, Ralph. Evan, go ahead.
Hi. Ours is so far only implemented for the auth side, authoritative side. The recursive side is in progress but not done yet, and the challenge that we're facing is that bind is designed to give more respect to the child side NS record than the parent side NS record when both are available. And we've been discussing for years the idea of changing that and using only the parent side record as the signal for what servers to delegate to. The implementing DELEG is a a good excuse for doing that, because that's how DELEG works. And so if we make a server that's going to respect the parent side for DELEG, then we might as well make it respect the parent side for everything. So the first step is to redo the resolver so that it is parent centric, and then add DELEG support to its resolution. And we've passed step 1, but haven't gotten to step 2 yet. As for the authoritative side, the only difficulty I've had is I tend to search for ambiguities when I'm reading a specification, and so I've been bothering Petter a fair bit with, did you mean for this, or is it possible you meant that? But mostly it's been fairly clear and fairly straightforward.
All right, thank you very much, Evan. Paul, you want to talk about yours as well?
Sure. And again, mine is actually somewhat trivial. I have done a resolver side in Python, so it's not meant to be and by the way, at this point it's single threaded, and I'll probably keep it as single threaded. It's meant for testing. It's not meant for deployment. And so I actually wrote I'm using DNS Python, the library, which is already DELEG enabled, or it is at least in a development branch that is publicly visible. And but there was no resolver written for DNS Python, so I wrote a resolver from scratch. And so I had a lot of problems with NS records and delegation. And then when I finished that and believed that the tests were, acting correctly, I added DELEG, and it really was not much of an issue. The only thing is, again, as other people were saying, is thinking about what does chasing indirection mean. But it turned out that chasing could actually be done, excuse me, in the same code, or right next to the same code for chasing CNAMEs. So that is done. I announced it on the list a while ago. It still has some things that it needs to be added. Like, for example, it's not doing DNSSEC validation yet. I've been spending my time instead trying to write a test harness so that we can, that all of the test harness for resolvers, so that all the resolvers can test against the various servers once they are available publicly or privately, and that we can have a nice clean set of test vectors for people. But like I say, I did not find any significant problems other than thinking about what does indirection mean. And indirection means something very similar to CNAME. So that was, once I could get my head wrapped around CNAME, I know almost everyone else on this call is much more familiar with the fun parts of CNAME. But once that happened, it really wasn't a big deal.
All right, thanks very much, Paul. Anybody else want to speak about implementation experience? Petter? Yeah.
Hi, I didn't implement it myself, but I know that the Libor Pelton from CZNIC is trying to join us and is having some difficulties, so hopefully he will appear. But meanwhile, if I can, I would ask the implementers, what are the rough parts of the draft of the spec? Is there anything unclear, or which section did you have to read like 5 times to understand it, or this kind of things? Is there anything like that, please?
I think we saw some of that on the list, but not a whole lot. Maybe there's more that, that folks haven't brought up yet. But that's an important question. Thanks, Petter. Paul?
About Evan mentioned. So sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
So I will channel Meek Gieben, whose name I'm not even sure how to pronounce. He has a authoritative server in Go, which is well used, and there's even a book written about it and stuff like that. He's done a complete re-implementation, and the only reason I'm speaking now is he posted on Mastodon a question about, wait, are we, what do we do when there's no NS records and stuff? And I posted back to him the paragraph from the document, and he was like, okay, great. So I'm not saying that he has no other issues, but the current way we do things in the world, which is you post your questions on social media and see if you get any right answers, had a quick turnaround and he was happy.
Thanks, Paul. Peter, go ahead again.
I wanted to mention that Evan, in his previous statement, said that he went back to me for some clarifications, and from what I remember, the question basically was, does the zone have to be signed, DNSSEC signed, to be used together with DELEG? We tried to clarify that in the draft, so perhaps a good question would be if anyone else got the impression that it has to be signed.
Would you like? Okay. The
Jump in, Evan. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the reason for that was the aforementioned very close parsing that I tend to do when I read specifications. And I was pretty sure the answer was no, but there was a line that said the DELEG record is at the top of the zone cut, and therefore it has to be signed by the parent. And I wasn't sure if maybe that has to be was intended to be read as a must. So I just was checking on it, and there were a few other places where something can be or something should be. It wasn't should. There was a couple of have to be's and some maybes, and I was like, just to be absolutely sure, are you just referring to the fact that and it can be this record can be signed by something else. I don't remember the specific details at this point, but I was just very, very closely parsing the text and checking to make sure that I wasn't missing any normative requirements that might have been intended, and I wasn't clear on them. So I suggested some changes for a few places in that, and I pointed out a few others to think about. And I think that was it. There was another problem of similar picky unionists, but I forget what it was right now. It's just, a normal human reading of the draft gave me the right answer, but an overly suspicious and picky reading of the draft gave me some ambiguity, and so I checked it.
Yep. That sounds great. Thanks. You got a follow-up, Peter?
Yeah, if I might add, I think that the most, I don't know how to call it, not misunderstandings, but the suspicion somehow comes from the fact that in a bunch of places we don't specify what exactly the behavior is because it's the same as for the original DNS. So we just say, behave the same way. And if we are a little bit more descriptive, and the behave the same way is usually like must. But then we go on in the next paragraph and say something like, basically examples in the text. And we try to say, okay, so if the answer is NX domain, then it should be blah, 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 but it's a lowercase should because we are very carefully trying to not restate the existing DNS, basically. So that's where the lowercase should or must or can or, these things come from. And I don't know what to do with it because I really don't want to do DNS omnibus RFC with all of them, folded together so we can actually specify what the behavior is. We are just trying to augment what we already have. And I don't know how to improve that. I don't know. And I've noticed that the Libor Pelton has joined. That's another implementer. So hopefully we will hear his experience as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So following on what Peter just said, I'm the person who earlier on, like 6 months ago, wanted lots of explicitness about what to do because I thought that was what developers wanted. I have come around to Peter's view, or Peter and the other author's view, that in fact it is better to say this is just like the DNS you're used to now, because in one or two of the places where I had tried to get us to say do it this way, which is the way that the DNS does it. There was a very good point, which is, but there are other things that are subordinate to that that we're not saying. And so the question is, are we saying you only have to do this top level-y thing like the old, like the current DNS, or do you have to do it all? And at this point, I believe the text is reasonably good about the differentiation between do it exactly the old way and here is a diff. But it would be great to hear from developers, especially if a developer is putting a new person on reading the spec, if they could say, what did that person wonder about differences from the current DNS? Again, I think we're doing good now, but I want to emphasize, I really do think the less we repeat, because a lot of the stuff we're repeating is not from 1035, it's actually from 2188 or whatever that one is, or one of the others. The less we repeat, the better.
All right, thanks, Paul. Evan, go ahead.
I remembered two other issues that were not mine, but were other people's that I thought I would bring up and comment on. One is the change from DELEG I to DELEG param. Is there general consensus that the change of the name has made things better? I didn't have any trouble understanding DELEG I. I understood what the intention of that was immediately, but it generated so much traffic on the list that I feel that somebody else, other people must have been thinking of it in a different light, and I'm hoping to hear how that is going now. The other was a relatively new developer working with me. I believe the word S list comes, I think, from 1035, but it was confusing because the S list is non-duplicative. So he assumed that if you encounter the same server address multiple times, then it gets put onto the list multiple times and not deduplicated, because it's called a list, not a set. And there's nothing we can do about that. I just, if there isn't actually text in the draft saying that the S list, things should be added to the S list only if they are not already duplicated there, maybe that would be worth adding.
Thanks, Evan. So, Libor, I'll give you a chance to
on Evan's last issue, I think we got that in the current draft of saying that it is a set. I'm just looking now.
Yeah, I'm sure that we added that we explicitly say this a set. And in this small group, I think that I can say that it would be a security issue if it wasn't a set. And we can go into details a little bit later when it's more public.
I just pasted in the current text from section 5.1.
Thanks, Paul.
5.1.4, sorry. Yep.
And what about people's current experiences with DELEG param?
I'm using someone else's library, and as of 3 minutes ago, I have a note on my calendar to ask them if they've updated their library.
Ralph, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so it is really just the name, and I think we've had a discussion on the list, and after some back and forth, that name was fine. I mean, again, I would have been okay with either. I think it's the bits and bytes on the wire are much more important, but I think DELEG param is fine now, and I didn't see any dissent on that, so we should just use it and go on.
All right, thanks everyone. I wanted to give Libor a chance to speak to his implementation experience if he would like to. I know you joined late, Libor, but hopefully you've caught up on the conversation. And if you'd like to speak, go ahead and speak or join the queue or whatever you like.
Thank you. Regarding my experience in implementing, I was implementing only the authoritative side of the DELEG. Actually, I did have already some insight about how the things are defined in the document because I participated a bit also when inventing actually the authoritative answering. So this was not me just poking into the document and so sorry for that.
Don't worry.
Sorry for that, just my child. I apologize. Again, let me do my camera. Okay, so I went to the document. I just was already clear what do I want to implement and how. So implementing the changes into the zone signer was a piece of cake. Implementing the changes to actually the answering routines was also not that difficult. And what I actually found difficult was the ADT bit in DNS key. It's not that difficult from the point of the implementation itself, but I think that the ADT bit is kind of difficult from the point of authoritative operations. And because our software tries to guide the operator to do the right thing, to follow the RFCs, and to do everything as defined, then it's there are problems like that the document requires that the ADT bit is actually present before any DELEG appears in the zone, and it also requires indirectly that you need to do some kind of key rollover before you introduce ADT bit. So this is too many requirements what to do before you actually put DELEG into the zone, and these need to be multiple steps and some waiting intervals between them. So this roll-in of DELEG into the authoritative zone is actually operationally quite a difficult thing, and the software has issues with this as well.
Thanks, Libor. So do you feel that there are still changes needed in the document to clarify this or not?
I don't really think so. We just need to find a way how to follow the document correctly and maybe arrange a smooth roll-in of DELEG into existing authoritative zones and tell people how to do this and what to avoid, how not to do this, and the software shall just be aligned with this process.
All right. Thanks much. So thanks for that discussion, everyone, so far. Let's try to focus down a little bit farther on the agenda. There's some questions here about is there a need for any additional examples or any thoughts or I guess objections to the current section 6 text. So if you have thoughts, opinions on those, please join the queue. Okay, nothing, no opinions, I guess. So, oh, got Petter in the queue. Go ahead, buddy.
Sorry, I shouldn't speak because I wrote that section, so I cannot really judge whether it's any good. But it attempts to answer the question of handling the ADT flag in 6.3.1. So if people, especially operators, have any feedback on that, please speak up, because it's basically, I mean, it's trying to describe basically the safest possible way, let's put it that way, safest possible way to introduce ADT flag into the DNS key set. It can be done in different ways as well, but I've tried to capture the idiot-proof way where you can roll back at as soon as possible without affecting the zone in any other way. So tell me if I succeeded or not, please.
All right. Paul?
So two things. One, I was waiting for the next section of the interim under specification completeness to talk about it, but it just has come up twice, which was the ADT bit. I'm going to make a negative prediction here, which is that we're going to finish, we're going to have discussed the ADT bit as well as we can in the document, and a little bit down the road, people are going to misinterpret, and by misinterpret, I mean make perfectly good interpretations of some of the words, and it's not going to be what we meant. And that there will either be an update to the base document or a separate document on the ADT bit. And I'm saying this, it's a little bit negative, but so far I think that's the only part that I expect people to get confused about or assume that their operations is supposed to be this way, when in fact we're like, no, you can do it however you want as long as the end result is there. So I agree with Petter, let's get it as right as possible now, but let's not assume that somebody who only cares about DNSSEC and could care less about DELEG looking at this is going to come to the conclusion we want. So that, I mean, and that speaks to specification completeness. I believe the specification is complete. We have the opportunity to have it be over complete, and I think Petter's doing a good job of pulling that back a bit. But as you know, as we are doing this, and as other people are looking at it, I definitely believe that there will be different ways of interpreting that one part into operations. The second bit was additional examples. And I apologize, I have not had enough time to get my test harness together, even for my own resolver. But I am working hard in my DELEG time to try to do that. And it is my intention to have my own set of test cases. Ralph sent his to the mailing list. It is my intention to have, and we have the ones in the appendix. It's my intention to have my own set of test cases with sort of descriptive labels on all the names before we meet at IETF 125, and explicitly trying to have it ready so that anyone at the hackathon, I'll be there just the second day on Sunday, that we can go through those. And if I'm really lucky, I will be able to have the test harness work with other people's resolver as well. And again, this is just for testing resolvers. I think testing authoritative servers is a completely different thing. And part of the reason I'm late on this is I was trying to do both at the same time. I would be interested if people feel like that we need negative test cases for authoritative servers, that like ones that say, if the zone looks like this, you should not emit the zone, or you should not do this. I suspect we don't want that, but I'd be open to talk about it. So again, if anyone's going to be at the hackathon, I'll be there the second day, and my focus will be on testing.
Thanks, Paul. Libor?
Okay, I just wanted to say that I have already established some running and publicly available examples of zone containing DELEG and behaving according to the authoritative specification of DELEG. And these all are below the labels d.xdp.cz. And yeah, I would write it into the chat if there was any. Okay, I will write that down into the chat.
And maybe on the mailing list if you haven't already shared it on the mailing list.
I did.
Okay, thanks. Good. Paul?
And I think it would behoove us for somebody, and I'll do it, to keep a public running list. I'll just make some trivial repo that has all of the test cases and, you know, a list of the implementations, not as something that says, look, we're doing great, as much as if I have an authoritative, then I can find where the resolvers are. A lot of these are on experimental branches, you know, in a Git repo. So like you know, something that says build this with this, I think would be fine. So I will do that, and I will certainly try to maintain it at least until we get an RFC.
If you need a repository in the, you know, DELEG parent repository, let me know. We can set that up for you.
Yeah, sometimes that's a hassle, but it also looks a lot better. So yeah, I'll ping you, Dwayne.
Yeah. Better?
I wonder whether just having an implementation status section would do, and of course we can remove it before publication or trim it to something of sensible length, but perhaps you can just slap it into the draft and make 0.8 so people can actually find it without, you know, knowing that there is a special magic repo somewhere, and things like that.
So to be clear, Peter, you're suggesting that to put into an implementation section of the draft, also include the test zones and other.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason why we can remove it. Why not? We can remove it before publication, but for now it will be easy to find for anyone who actually looks at the draft.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And not only to have the test data, but also, you know, other implementation experience.
Yeah, I mean, can be everything we have basically, right? And then we will remove it before publication. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Okay, so any other discussion? I mean, so, you know, this is a small group, very informal, but feel free to take the discussion where you want, but I'll just give a last chance for anyone that has comments on examples or the section 6 text. Otherwise, we can move on to discussing DE-bit and security considerations, which I think the only part in security considerations right now is just to do, right?
Actually, we have two sections in the security considerations with to do, add more. Plus, I've sent third section or subsection to the mailing list yesterday, but that's obviously not in 07.
Okay, all right, thanks. Dale?
Yes, can I maybe actually suggest a quick agenda bash here, because sadly I have to leave in 10 minutes for a hard conflict. Clearly, one of the things that is still generating a lot of traction on the list is about NS synthesis. And I think it would be good for the room to address that. I will just say briefly that I am still opposed to the idea of NS synthesis being included in the protocol, because it is a very limited corner case that administrators can work their own way out of, and that software implementations can handle on their own without it being in the protocol.
Can you clarify, Taylor, when you say in the protocol, do you mean any mention at all, or saying must?
Right. Well, I think we should mention, as Section 6 currently does, so I guess we're still there, right, that NS is not required, that you might have a delegation point that does not have NS records, and here's what you do. So this is related to the DE bit also. Here's what you do if you get a DE0 query that would hit an NS list delegation point. So I don't think that the protocol should require that NS be synthesized at that point. Whereas on the list, we have at least a couple of people who are still advocating that this makes it more deployable to have NS synthesis. I question the methodology by which they have determined that it becomes more deployable, again, for a situation that administrators, you know, if they care, can just avoid getting into.
Okay, thanks. Peter?
Yeah, I wanted to say that we already mentioned the possibility of generating the NS records out of DELEG in the section 6. So I don't think that authors, if I can speak for them, are opposed to the idea of synthesis. What we are mostly opposed to is the idea of having it as a must synthesize, blah, blah, blah. And that's circling back to the security considerations, which is the topic you put on the agenda. because it has security implications. If you have NS record and you don't need it, then you are lowering the security, and then we can argue whether it matters or not. But technically, it changes security properties if you have NS record, and it changes then in like going downhill. So that's the reason why I'm personally opposed to that.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, DELEG can do more than NS record. So some things, future things, or even some current things cannot be expressed with NS. So, and people might want to run different infrastructure for stuff. I mean, when we come to secure transports, for stuff that is DELEG aware and stuff that is not DELEG aware. So I think, again, what Peter said, if somebody wants to write a server that does NS synthesis, I have no problem with that. But it's nothing that belongs in the protocol from my point of view.
Yeah, so there was quite a bit of discussion on the list, as you said, Tail, but I'm guessing it seems like the proponents aren't on this meeting, so that is what it is. Was that sufficient for your agenda, Bash?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So anything else to discuss in terms of specification completeness at this point? Evan?
I'm sorry, this is not an else, it's a continuation. Well, we were all
Sure.
agreeing with each other about this not belonging in the protocol. The question I haven't seen answered is, would it be okay for the draft to mention that it's permissible so that people reading the draft aren't going to keep coming up with the same question? Like as a weak may as opposed to a must.
So based on what I heard from the authors, I thought they were okay with that, but I guess that the draft doesn't currently say anything about synthesis. Is that the case? And
yeah, I think that
Peter?
one of the versions of the draft had it. Right now, I cannot find it, which surprises me, honestly. I thought that it's explicitly mentioned in section 6, but I guess it fell victim to some trimming the text from the mailing list. But that wasn't intentional. I mean, sure, we can say, Paul is posting something, so perhaps I'm not reading it right into the chat.
So what I posted is from the current draft, and it does not use the word synthesis, and I think that is correct to not use the word synthesis. It says you can put in DELEG records, you can put in NS records, and that in fact you might need to. Section 6.2 is that. I haven't said it on the mailing list, but I would if we started to use the word synthesis in the draft. The word synthesis is completely unclear, and I've already talked to two different people with very different views about how you would synthesize from a DELEG record. And so that is a DELEG record that has an IP address. Is that synthesizable or not? Well, you can make up a name for it, and you should make up a name. And the other person was like, no, if you're just doing IP address, don't do it. So I think the current text is what we want because it doesn't use the word synthesis, but it's right at the beginning of operational considerations. And it says, if you want to do this, go for it.
Ben?
Hi. Based on this conversation, I think we actually need a must not. I think the rule here, as I understand it, is that an authoritative server must not synthesize NS records from DELEG unless there is a private agreement to do so with the zone owner. Essentially, if you're using a general purpose authoritative server loading a zone in the standard format, you shouldn't have to worry about whether it will or will not do some kind of NS synthesis that we haven't really specified. I could say we could define a flag that marks particular DELEG records as basically suitable for NS synthesis in some defined way. But we haven't done that, and I would say we probably should defer that to some future draft.
I put myself in the queue because I wanted to respond to your earlier point, Paul, in the text you pasted in 6.2, because the way I read that is sort of advice to operators, and I think the discussion on the list was more about advice to implementers about whether or not they can synthesize, in software. So I'm not sure that 6.2 already meets the need that some people are looking for. Anyway.
Can you wait before you go off? Can you say what you think that need is, Dwayne?
Well, I'm hearing some people say that it should be allowed, that an authoritative server should be allowed to synthesize NS records from DELEG records.
Right.
That's it.
So, and you're not feeling that that's what this says?
No, I feel like what 6.2 says is more about the provisioning side, the what goes in a zone, not what a server can synthesize.
Okay, so I agree with you that there is a desire for both of those, and if we didn't hit it, we should add text to that.
Okay. Go ahead. You can go next to the other point.
Okay, my other point is I just fundamentally disagree with what Ben just said about that they must not. We in the DNS world suck so badly at differentiating a zone operator versus the who can put things in the zone. This is the exact wrong document to try to differentiate there. And if a zone operator wants to do something that is harebrained, they might still have a very good reason to do that we cannot predict. So like they could do a very bad job of quote synthesizing. Again, we haven't described what synthesizing is. So I absolutely would not support a must not here.
Better.
My take is that we already described what happens if you have and don't have the NS record present. The additional paragraph for security considerations will explain that also from the security angle, and we already have the operations angle. And I don't think that anything in the current text forbids anyone from doing the synthesis, because like on a philosophical level, the synthesis is basically zone data management, right? It doesn't matter whether we describe what the bits on the wire mean and how to interpret them, but it doesn't matter whether the server creates the NS record on the fly or whether it's doing something like NS update to modify the zone content when you modify the DELEG record, or whether anything externally does something to the zone when you modify the DELEG record. It doesn't matter. We already described bits on the wire, so I think that we are already covered, basically. And I will also agree with Paul that must not feels wrong, because, again, we describe what happens if you add the NS record, and then it's up to the operator to decide whether they want to do that or not. I mean, not my business. I just explain what the bits mean, but what they put in their zone, well, they think.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, I'm agreeing with Petter. I mean, the thing that we possibly could put in is how NS and DELEG records are managed within software and zones is beyond the scope of the document, because it really is. I mean, we describe how the protocol works on the wire, and how the data gets there, I mean, is someone else's problem, so to speak.
Yeah, so I understand that people don't seem very convinced by this argument, but let me try to make one more version of it for you. Imagine that you're doing a zone transfer of a zone that has DELEG records and NS records. Would it be compliant for the recipient of the zone transfer, for the secondary server, to synthesize NS records into the zone? I would say that's a non-compliant secondary. It's modifying the contents of your zone. You didn't give it permission to do so. So that's yes, that would mess up. DNSSEC would prohibit this, assuming the secondary doesn't have signing keys, but not all zones are signed. So that's an example of the kind of synthesis that I think is forbidden, unless there's a private arrangement permitting it.
Paul?
Yeah, but that's the same thing is true for any zone transfer, like where someone, so for example, and I'm just speaking on the fly here, you do a zone transfer and the person who was transferred to looks in the child and notices that the NS records are different and wants to do something about it. We cannot say, here's every wrong thing you might do, and this is what we feel about it. Someone in DNSOP, not in this working group, might want to make such a list, and that would include some DELEG things. And it might even include some DELEG things like you must not have a DELEG record that has a domain, that points to a domain name and a similar one that points to the IP address for that domain name at the time. That's way down in a rabbit hole. This is not part of what our spec should be.
2 points answering Ben. The changes from the parent, from the primary to the secondary, already happen in the case of inline signers. The secondary just ends up with a different zone MD, a different serial number, and different data. So that actually, I would say, is permissible if you want to have that be a flag in your secondary server. The reason that I asked for us to continue discussion on this is because it was a question that occurred to me when it occurred to me that it happens that the way that we are implementing our delegation database is by taking NS records and synthesizing them into DELEG records and storing them that way. So if you can do it one way, you could do it the other way. And it occurred to me to wonder if people might want to synthesize NS records if they find a delegation that isn't an NS, that doesn't have an NS. And so it was a question that I asked, and I saw that at least 2 other people on the mailing list had asked, which means that there's ambiguity, which means I would be okay with a must not. I would be against a must because I don't think it's a good idea. And I would be entirely fine with a little bit of text saying that this is a thing that you can do if you want to, but it's outside the scope of the document. But I don't think I'd be very happy with silence, which currently we don't have enough noise. There's people asking questions too much. And the fact that I asked us to continue talking about it and we're still talking about it 10 minutes later kind of supports that argument, I think. But so I'm arguing in favor of putting something there, just to acknowledge that it is a thing in the universe of things that an implementer might want to do, but we're not going to tell you how to do it in the scope of this document.
Thanks a lot, Evan. Peter?
So, echoing what Ralph said, would it be sufficient to say that zone data management is out of scope for us, and we describe what's on the wire, and then we can mention that, yeah, you can do on-the-fly changes to your zone data if you feel like it, but we are not going to tell you what to do with it. Plus, perhaps a reference to the relevant sections from the security considerations, where we can say, well, if you add an NS record, it has security implications, so think twice about doing that. Would that be sufficient instead of saying like must not or must or whichever,
Yes, yeah, I think just acknowledging the existence of this is an idea that someone's going to have, and saying that it's outside the scope of the document will probably silence the questions.
And should we put that into, I don't know, operational considerations, or where would we put that? Because right now we don't have anything like that because it kind of doesn't fit into the document as of now.
I think operational considerations is just fine because that's also where we're talking about other bits like this.
Yeah, okay, can be a new subsection, why not?
Hey, Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Dwayne. Just to say that I agree with what Paul has just said there. I think we'll have to put some text in the document about these concerns, and operational considerations seems to be the appropriate place to put it. I'm kind of not inclined to completely rule this whole issue of zone file management or zone content management as being out of scope for the work we're doing here. I think at least we need to recognise what some of the potential concerns about this are, so that implementers and others can at least be aware of that. And maybe that needs to be documented in this RFC to be. That's all.
Thanks, Jim. Any other discussion on this in this section? We've got still 30 minutes reserved, so if people want to have discussion, we can do that. Otherwise, if the discussion has run its course, then we can move on to the end of the agenda.
Actually, I've just realized that we've missed one thing on the agenda, and that's the question of early allocation, or how is it called in IONA terms. If I would be interested to hear if people are comfortable with the var format and the names, and whether it would be a good time to ask IONA to allocate us the permanent numbers so the implementers don't have to change it later on. And personally, I say that I think that the bits on the var are stable. With the names, I haven't heard opposition to the new names. So hopefully, if we can confirm that, I would like to see the early allocation if possible.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of that, Peter. That's a good idea. There was some discussion about this on the list, but I guess it wasn't resolved. So if folks have thoughts on this, feel free to speak up.
We need to be super careful on this one. I'm not sure, like, I don't remember which of the ranges we're asking for DELEG and DELEG param, but we only get one shot at this. So I would say this has to be a list discussion with the actual numbers that we're thinking about. I think the DE flag and the ADT flag are probably fine, but given that we're having an interaction with the DNS op working group on this specific topic, at least for the DELEG RR, not for the DELEG param RR, we need to have it on the mailing list, and it also has to go to the DELEG working group, or it has to be aligned with, I'm sorry, with the DNS op working group.
Yeah, that is a concern which was raised on the DELEG mailing list by Paul Waters, who is with us today. And I think that the conclusion was that it seems fine. So, I mean, of course, we should double check, but we already thought about that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, let's revive that discussion on the list and try to bring it to agreement, and then we can put in the request for the allocation. Anything else? What other things can you think of that we forgot to add to the agenda, Peter?
Well, you've already mentioned it, and that's the is unless record mandatory. And I'm not saying necessarily synthesis, but is it mandatory so the zone even loads? Because that's what Paul Vixie would like to see, right? We have read that on the mailing list, I think today or yesterday. And I guess that Joe Ebley would like to see something like that as well, but none of them is here, so not sure that we can productively discuss that.
Yeah, so there was a flurry of discussion just yesterday and today around this topic, right? And I think if I try to channel Joe for a second, his concern was that DELEG basically allows, or as written, was allowing servers to say that names don't exist when they really exist. But in his message today, he had a proposal to use the delegation to nowhere concept. So maybe we want to spend a few minutes talking about that. Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bad idea for multiple reasons. I mean, the NS dot is a bad idea because it will generate serve fail. And I mean, we have it in the security section. If you put an NS there, then pretty much an attacker can put anything in there because the NS is not signed at the parent. So you cannot make sure that the delegation goes there. So I think we should not do that.
So to be clear, you think we should not support delegation to nowhere as a solution to this?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Paul, sorry.
So I would like to define who we are. I don't think that this discussion should be part of the DELEG working group. It should be part of DNS Op. And I'm happy to ignore the discussion there because it comes up every 2 years and it seems like people keep forgetting the problems that came up 2 years ago. But we are not creating anything new in here with the delegations that and the idea of delegation to nowhere or to an AS112 or whatever. We're not doing anything in here that has not already been discussed and pretty much run into the ground in DNS Op. I think it is an operational issue, not a DELEG protocol specific issue, and therefore should not be done here.
Thanks, Paul. Peter?
Yeah, I agree with that point of view because the protocol works as I believe as specified right now. If people are concerned with this like NX domain for legacy clients versus no error for DELEG ever clients, well, nothing prevents them from actually having the NS record. So if it is a concern, well, put NS record there and you are done. If it's not a concern, or perhaps it's even harmful because your clients are DELEG aware and are supposed to use only TLS, you can stop one class of attacks by not having NS at all, and then it will not be in the type bitmap. So that's what the security section tries to, the addition to the security consideration section tries to say. But sorry, I lost the train of thought. What was it? Never mind. I will try to join the queue again if I remember.
Okay, no problem. Well, I think, did you remember? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I remembered, yes. The thing is that we cannot really specify anything except serve fail versus NX domain, because the reason why the legacy client gets NX domain is not our specification. The reason for the NX domain follows from the previous spec. So the 1035 plus together with the 4035, the old traditional DNS, or how to call it, plus DNSSEC together insist on having NX domain for legacy clients. I mean, there is no other way because it's specified by the old protocols and we cannot change the old clients. So if we want to be compliant with the existing DNS as of today, we cannot really do anything else except for NX domain, or we can say screw it and remember return serve fail, because that's the only other possibility which, I mean, it will not validate, but it's at least believable. So personally, I'm fine with putting extra sentence in the draft and say, well, if you don't feel like it, you can return serve fail and cause retry storms from your clients. But I mean, that's on you. But I think that the spec should mandate the, I don't know how to call it, the legacy DNS compatible behavior, which is annex domain. And then, I mean, if implementation wants to deviate for some reason, they can do, declare this is local policy and do whatever they feel like. So I think that the discussion is kind of misguided, because annex domain doesn't come from our spec. It comes from the previous specs, so we cannot change it, basically. That's the argument I'm trying to make.
Okay, understood. Thanks, Peter. So if we're done with those topics, we can venture into talking about extensions for secure transports, which is something that we've sort of intentionally waited on the base specification to begin the discussion about secure transports. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul, since this is something that he has thought about and written about previously on the list. So Paul, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, sure. And just to be clear, this is still very loosey-goosey. I've presented on it before, but the question is not exactly what would we put into a secure transports extensions document, but when do we want to have it? At the last time I presented about this, which I think was 2 IETFs ago, I said, I don't think we should start this document until the base spec is complete. And I've heard a little bit of pushback actually from the chairs saying we should, now that the base spec is not complete, but is unchanging technically, basically, although we just heard about that being different. This is an okay time to start. So my question really is, when do people want to start on this? And again, I'm happy to do the initial draft. We've got the draft cut off on Monday, but I can certainly throw together the basic things that people have talked about, which is to be able to say, in this current DELEG record where I am showing a delegation, you should try over this secure transport, and a possible second extension that says, if you're trying over this secure transport, you should expect a DANE record for it, a TLSA record for it. And I am sure that whatever I do initially will be radically different by the time we're done. I just don't want us to everyone's going to love focusing on this. I just don't want people to focus on this instead of the current document, but other people might want to see the two of them. So I'm totally open to people saying start now or start later.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I wouldn't say the chairs are pushing for this, but the reason that we brought it up is because as we start to see implementations of this, it might be helpful to start to think about the transports and make sure that the base protocol spec can accommodate, whatever we have in mind for transports. So I think this is the right time to have the discussion about the time to introduce transports, and I'll go to the queue. Peter?
Yeah, I agree with you that thinking about the transports will be basically double checking that we've done the extensibility mechanism right. So I like that. On the other hand, I'm almost sure that people will just focus on the secure transports because that's the new sexy thing and stop paying attention for the base protocol. But on the third hand, if we say that we are done with the base spec, like more or less, I don't mean the document, but like changing the spec. we can, keep going, adding examples and clarifying sentences here and there and stuff like that. But if we say that the protocol itself is stable and we are just like polishing the text, then it might be fine to actually start diverting the attention to the secure transports, which would, as a side effect, verify the extensibility of the base spec. So sounds fine to me if chairs feel that we are kind of, sort of, basically done with the base spec.
Yeah, so that was 3 hands, right, Petter? On first hand, second hand, and third hand?
Yeah. Multitasking, it helps with multitasking.
All right. Any other comments, Paul?
Well, we have proof that Libor knows how to handle 3 hands, or even 4, depending on how you're counting. So anyways, yeah, I can always do a draft. I'm just worried that if I do a draft, obviously it would start as a personal draft. People are going to start discussing on the mailing list regardless. And if the chairs don't want that, they're going to have to step in and say, stop discussing it. So, yeah.
Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, again, the wire protocol hasn't changed in a couple of revisions now, and I think we're also now good for the text presentation for the base draft. And a lot of the people that are actually waiting for experimenting with some of the stuff. I mean, we did some implementation of actual transports in and out of the resolver already. So I think it's a good time to start now. And then again, we'll probably find out if there is a problem with the extension mechanism, which I don't think so, before the actual draft becomes an RFC. But I mean, yeah, go for it. I mean, let's do it and discuss it at the IETF.
Any other thoughts from folks? So let me put a more concrete proposal out there. Do people feel like IETF 125 is the right time to see and start discussing a draft on transport extensions, or would you rather wait until after IETF 125? Or don't care? Ralph?
The only problem with 125 could be participation, but I mean I would be fine to discuss it there.
Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'd be inclined to leave it until after IETF 125, so we can clear the working group agenda, stuff that's on the agenda for discussion in Shenzhen, get that out the way first. I think if we start diving into the transport layer issues, we might end up, or the transport concerns, we might end up boiling the ocean prematurely. So I would like to see the base work and the protocol specs done and dusted before we start moving on to other extensions and stuff like that.
When you say done and dusted, do you mean like working group last call? At what point?
Well, ideally, yes, Dwayne, but maybe that's a little bit premature. But I still think we should focus primarily here in getting this base protocol spec as close to final as we can make it before we start taking on new responsibilities. I'm not saying we don't have to consider these other responsibilities, such as the extensions for secure transports, but I think that should come a little bit later on once we've got some of the initial workload out of the way.
All right, thanks, Jim. Others? Anyone? Paul?
Given what Jim just said, I think that, because we still have weeks before, how about if I split it and say that I won't have the draft done for the draft cutoff on Monday, but I'm working on it. And if people want to make suggestions to me, that's fine. But then I'll publish it at the beginning of the week of IETF 125 when the window opens again. And that way we have a couple of weeks to, get closer to done and dusted, and we will then know whether I should be doing it at all. That is, I'm sorry, whether I should be doing it before the working group meeting or after. And Jim's saying +1. Okay, so I will hold off on it. I will mention on the mailing list that I'm working on it and see if anyone actually wants to co-author, as, sort of in the background. And then we'll figure out exactly when to do it, whether we want it as part of the face-to-face meeting at all or immediately afterwards.
Which face-to-face meeting do you mean, Paul? The IETF 125 face-to-face meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's just see whether that's is a better timing thing than the fact that the draft cutoff is in 5 days.
Yeah. So I mean, we don't have a lot of input here, but I'm definitely hearing support for the idea that we should wait until after IETF 125. I heard Jim say, maybe even wait longer, wait until the base spec goes to working group last call, which could be, I don't know, even after, could be a while still. So no, did I misinterpret, Jim? Sorry.
Yes, you did, Dwayne. I wasn't suggesting that at all.
Oh,
as long as the protocol spec stuff is getting closer to completion, I think that should be a priority at this stage.
Okay.
And as I've just posted in the chat, I think if we start discussing extensions for secure transport right now, that focus on the core spec will get diverted, and that would be unfortunate.
Ben?
So I've in the past tried to write up drafts of how secure transport could work in DELEG. I think that there's a key upfront design question that shapes the whole solution, and it's about basically the relationship between DNSSEC, DANE, and PKI, and a bunch of different kind of combinations of resolver support versus zone, like different kinds of resolvers versus different kinds of zones. Which combinations do we care to support? Deciding that up front, I think, really would simplify the question of developing a solution. And so I'd like to, before maybe we can sort of push back a little bit on the details of how we encode this kind of instruction, but focus on the requirements, basically.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ben. All right, so it sounds like we're in agreement on that to wait until after IETF 125 to start getting into the secure transports and focus for now on the base spec. Any other topics? Any other business for the interim meeting today? All right. Doesn't sound like it, so we can end early. And thanks everyone for coming today. And we'll meet again. We're meeting on Friday of IETF 125 in Shenzhen time. So hopefully we see you there again. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.